All right, so today we're going to be talking about German expansion from 1938 to 1940. So in the last lecture that I filmed, it was from 33 to 38, and now we're going to focus from 38 to 1940. That's going to be our main focus. So if this can work, there we go. What are our essential questions? So examine the ways in which Hitler went further than challenging the post-war settlement after 1937. To what extent was Hitler successful in carrying out his foreign policy aims? And discuss the consequences of Hitler's actions for the international situation. All those are our essential questions that we'll be focusing on. So what are the themes for this? What are the components of German expansion between the years 1938 and 1940? The territory is Austria, the Sudetenland, Czechoslovakia. So Sudetenland's part of Czechoslovakia, Poland, Western Europe, Soviet Union. You will need to know the order of this. I don't believe it is on the test per se, but you will need to know the order of this for future paper ones. Just keep that in mind. Okay, so we're going to focus from 1938 forward until basically the beginnings of World War II, so into the 1940s, right? In the last lecture, I told you about this. You have the Hossbach Memorandum, which basically lays out Hitler's game plan, right? We're going to go after Czechoslovakia. We're going to go after Austria. We're going to try to avoid a global war, at least until we're fully militarily prepared, but we know that's probably going to be the case, and it is what it is. We just have to deal with it. Some of the old school Prussian aristocrats that made up the heads of the military, right? So we had the first minister of war, and you have the commander-in-chief of the German army, both Blumberg and Fritsch here. So Blumberg is the defense minister, and Fritsch is the head of the army. So minister of war is Blomberg, it's Blomberg. And Fritsch down here is the leader of the military, so the commander-in-chief of the military. They aren't big fans of... They think that Czechoslovakia should be a target later on. They think Austria should be a target, but they're very much more cautious. They think even the years 43 to 45 are a very explosive timeline that could put Germany in a situation where they're going to war against Britain and France when they're not fully prepared. Hitler does not like this. Guys that are very close to Hitler, like Goering and Himmler, aren't big fans of their decision-making, and through scandals, both will be removed from their positions of power. So the 1938 Blomberg-Fritsch affair. I'm not going to go into full detail about it. It's quite an interesting story. If you want to watch it, there's a professor linked here on this picture of Blomberg right over here. If you click him, you will be able to view it. It's from a professor, and he talks in detail about the affair. But anyway, so the big thing is this. They lose their jobs, and you'll also see a bunch of other old-school commanders go down with them, and Hitler will be named supreme commander of the German army. What does this mean? Why is this important? It's important because this is going to allow him to execute his own policy now. He is no longer restrained by some more conservative elements of the German military, especially those in high command. He now has control over what the military is going to do. So and as we know, there's a 4-year plan going on. We have developed arms to a much larger extent than what existed before, so we violated to a much larger extent the limitations of the Treaty of Versailles. So Hitler's ready and eager to get a bit more aggressive. So works towards further Versailles revisions, most importantly, Lebensraum, which is his living space, and the Anschluss, which is that unification with Austria. You will need to know those two things. Okay, so the order of the invasions, Austria is in 38. Then after Austria, later in 1938, you get the Sudetenland. Then in March 1939, you get Czechoslovakia. Then by September 1939, you get Poland. Western Europe is done by the time we get to June 1940, and the Soviet Union in 1941. That's going to be his order of attack. So a mnemonic device that you could use is Ashpu, or Ashpu, whatever you want to say. So like Achu, almost. So again, Austria, Sudetenland, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Western Europe, Soviet Union. So it makes sense, right? Austria, Anschluss is of great importance. Sudetenland's part of Czechoslovakia. Then we get the rest of Czechoslovakia. Then we eventually take Poland, get a wider war with Western Europe, and then eventually turn our sights to get that Lebensraum from the Slavs in the Soviet Union. That's going to be our objective. Again, you should know the order of this. You should know the dates and the months in which each event occurs. Okay, so the Anschluss, 1938. So we know that Hitler struggles to get it in 1934. He doesn't necessarily directly himself try to take over the Austrian government, but Austrian Nazis essentially on his behalf try to take it over. You know, Mussolini sends troops through the Brenner Pass, puts them on Germany's border, and basically says, try me. And Hitler is not in a position to try him. But we know after the whole Abyssinian crisis, after the Horloval Pact falls apart, Mussolini basically tells Austria, hey, You got to deal with Germany directly. I'm no longer protecting you," and gives the hint to Hitler that he's okay with Austria becoming essentially a satellite state. So in 1930, you get the Austro-German Agreement. What does it do? It reaffirms, Germany reaffirmed its recognition of Austria's independence. Basically, that both countries will respect each other's like internal affairs, but will align with each other in terms of foreign policy. Then Austria would essentially conduct a foreign policy consistent with being a German state. So on the surface, it looks like Austria is mostly independent. Does not look like Germany is going to go in and invade, but Austria is expected to operate as a German satellite state. It's ethnically German, so this makes sense to a certain extent. But again, the Austrian government is expecting through this agreement to maintain some sovereignty, some independence, not to come directly under the control of Adolf Hitler and be fully reunited with Germany. We know that is, well, I shouldn't even say reunited. The point being, bringing them together, right? Having the Anschluss uniting the ethnic German people. But obviously, that's not Hitler's aim, right? Hitler wants the whole thing, and he wants it under direct German control. What's going to be a super important aspect of this agreement is that you're going to see some Nazis, Austrian Nazis, that are very much against Austrian independence and would love to see this Anschluss basically be allowed to be members of the government's cabinet at this time. So this is a problem because you're giving them a louder political voice, and this gives them the opportunity to more effectively organize and potentially destroy Austria from the inside. So what ends up happening is Kurt Schuschnigg, who is the chancellor of Austria at the time, he has some Austrian Nazis in his government. He also is dealing with a lot of rebellious Austrian Nazis that are causing trouble and wreaking havoc and basically creating a situation where they could potentially try to overthrow the government, just like how they tried to kill Engelbert Dollfuss. And Schuschnigg is not happy about this. So he wants to have a meeting with Hitler to talk about, hey, you need to tell these Austrian Nazis to calm down. They cannot try to combine us with you. We're supposed to be somewhat independent. So he meets with Hitler in February 12, 1938 at Berchtesgaden, which is basically the location of Hitler's Bergdorf, I think it's called. I'm forgetting the name off the top of my head. But his resort, basically his like vacation home. So he's going to meet with Hitler to discuss this, but instead of getting his point across, Hitler does his legendary like 2-hour tirade. He's basically like, you should be a part of Germany. You're lucky I haven't just sent troops in already. You need to respect me. You need to respect what the Austrian Nazis are doing there. If you want to keep challenging me and you don't agree to the terms that I'm about to propose to you right now, I'm going to invade directly. So he had to agree to release some of the Nazi agitators that the government had arrested. He had to lift the formal ban against the Nazi Party, which allows them to organize even further. He had to appoint more Nazis into his government. So his Nazis as Secretary of the Interior, Secretary of War, and of Finance Ministers. And there had to be economic assimilation of the two nations. So their economies had to be even further tied together. This is essentially hinting at, through these actions, the Nazi Party getting stronger in Austria, and eventually a full-blown Austrian Nazi takeover that allows the Germans to take over Austria. It makes it become not independent, losing its sovereignty. So Schuschnigg agrees to this, but what he's going to do is he's going to set a plebiscite up for March 13th to allow Austrians to vote. Do they want to be a part of Germany, dissolve themselves and join Germany, or do they want, quote, a free and German, independent and social, Christian and united Austria? The wording of that is a little bit confusing, but the objective here is, and the reason why is it's supposed to be, because you're trying to tell people this is what I'm going to offer you in terms of Austria being independent, right? So laying out what it would be if you say yes to this agreement. And it's going to be Schuschnigg's party that's going to be running this plebiscite. So the likelihood that they are going to win this plebiscite is relatively huge, relatively large, relatively huge. Large. It's large. It's going to be huge. But Hitler does not want to see this democratic action go through, okay? Because he knows, given the wording, given the fact that Schuschnigg is running this, Austria is probably going to vote for their own independence, and if they vote for their own independence to stay away from unification with Germany, maybe the more liberal governments in the world might step in if this plebiscite shows that result. So what does Hitler do? 2 days before this whole plebiscite is I should say a day before this whole plebiscite is going to happen, Hitler is going to march into Austria. So Hitler did not want this plebiscite to happen. Mussolini gives Hitler his assurance that he would not object to an Anschluss, and Hitler proceeds to mobilize his army. Schleswig's going to find out that there's going to be no help coming from Italy, Britain, or France to defend him. So he's going to ultimately end up resigning. And a day before the plebiscite occurs, Hitler's forces are going to march into Austria, and you're going to get that unification. And then he's going to end up in his hometown. When he ends up his hometown, there's going to be this dramatic. They're going to make it seem like it's this dramatic, emotional scene. And there, Hitler's going to announce Austria's incorporation into the Reich. So he's ticked off that a plebiscite might happen. And he basically says, there's going to be no plebiscite. I'm going to march in and I'm going to unify it directly. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my own plebiscite to further legitimize what I just did. So he's going to set up a plebiscite for April 10th, 1938. And it's going to confirm by 99% of the population that they want to join with Germany. So it's basically a big middle finger to Schleswig at this point. And Schleswig does resign, and you get Austria. You get your Anschluss in March of 1938, later on April. Okay, so what does a historian say about this? So the Anschluss and the methods that brought it about had far-reaching consequences. Hitler had gambled successfully again. He became convinced that his strategy of ruthless power politics, so him bullying Schleswig, had been vindicated and just marching his troops into there to avoid a plebiscite, and that it was the only effective policy against his war-weary and vacillating opponents. Aside from reinforcing Hitler's belief in the effectiveness of international blackmail and intimidation, the Anschluss also had far-reaching consequences in the field of diplomacy. It promoted the friendship of the two fascist tyrants, Hitler and Mussolini, and this further polarized European powers. Another consequence of the Anschluss was that Germany's strategic position was greatly enhanced. With Vienna at his disposal, Hitler had acquired direct access to the whole of southeastern Europe. From Vienna, it was only a footstep to Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and Yugoslavia. The next target's going to be the Sudetenland. I'm going to skip this video of German unification, their march into Austria, but look how people react. Part of it is propaganda, yes, but look how people react, because there's a lot of ethnic Germans that live in Austria during this time period. Reason why I'm bringing that up is because it gives some sort of legitimization to why maybe the Western powers were a little bit more hesitant, particularly Britain at that time. All right, here's Czechoslovakia for you. Czechoslovakia is a country that is multi-ethnic. It is created from the Treaty of Versailles. Again, it is multi-ethnic liberal democracy. It is the antithesis of what the Nazis believe in. It is not an ethnically unified state, and it is functioning relatively well as a multiracial liberal democracy. And I'll show you this map. So you've got some Germans over in this like dark purplish color. You've got ethnically Czech people over here in the western part of Czechoslovakia. You've got Slovaks in the middle with some ethnic German pockets right there. You have Hungarians in the south. You got Ukrainians in the east, and you got some Poles in the north. So this is a multi-ethnic government that Hitler would love to see come down because it's multi-ethnic. You also have a lot of Slavs that live there. And obviously we know from what I've told you about in the past that Slavs are viewed as racially inferior, essentially at the level of the Jews, maybe a step up from them. So the reason that I'm telling you these things is because these are some of his motivations as to why he would turn his focus to Czechoslovakia. Many Czechs resisted Austrian rule in the old Austro-Hungarian Empire and had fought for Russia during World War I rather than Austria. So Czechoslovakia was part of Austro-Hungarian territory, and it was lost and it was created and again into this Czechoslovakian state, this multi-ethnic state as a result of the Treaty of Versailles, right? So the fact that these Czechs had resisted Austrian rule for all those years, so an ethnically German state, and they went to fight on behalf of the Russians is absolutely disgusting. And I already said this. Czechoslovakia is the only successful independent state created by the Versailles Settlement. And it consisted of many different peoples, and it therefore proved that ethnically diverse people could live together in relative harmony. Hitler hates that idea. That goes completely against what fascists believe in, right? Hitler's main thing is those liberal cities with its multi-ethnic liberal democracies are absolutely disgusting and harm the greatness of the nation state. Czechoslovakia itself, the leaders of the federal government of Czechoslovakia were enthusiastic supporters of the League of Nations, and they had alliances with France and with Russia. So you know from that little entente that existed, the triple entente, I should say, and the alliance that they had with the Soviet Union as well. So they were allied with some of Germany's worst enemies, most fierce enemies at this time. And again, here's how ethnically diverse this is, right? This is the Sudetenland right over here, this purplish area, okay? And I'm going to tell you why on this next slide, why the Sudetenland is super important. So the Sudetenland is a mountainous area rich in mineral resources given to Czechoslovakia to give the new state strong frontier and to ensure its prosperity. The big thing, it is a mountainous region. So that gives you natural borders with the German Reich. It makes it easier to defend yourself. It is, again, rich in minerals and in oil. Allows you, well, not oil, rich in minerals in general, and allows you to develop a large manufacturing base. You're going to see that the Czechs, because of their large manufacturing base throughout most of their country in Czechoslovakia, but the big thing is the resources that they get from the Sudetenland allows them to have a really strong and effective army for their size and for their recent birth as a nation state. But the issue is that you have 3.5 million Germans living in the Sudetenland that don't want to be a part of Czechoslovakia, that would love to be a part of the German Reich. They are disgusted by the fall and removal from the old Austrian-Hungarian Empire, and we know that as the Great Depression hits most of Western Europe, it's going to play a role in affecting Czechoslovakia and the stability of that country. So the Sudeten Germans, those ethnically German people that live in the Sudetenland, are led by Konrad Heinlein. So he is going to be demanding self-determination for his group of people, and he's going to challenge and cause chaos for the president of Czechoslovakia at this time. He's going to be supported by Adolf Hitler, and because of the fact that Adolf Hitler wants to eventually take over Czechoslovakia, but really first and foremost, get the Sudeten Germans to be part of Germany not once more, because they were a part of the old Austro-Hungarian Empire, but make them join into this new German empire that's rebuilding itself. That's his objective. So he's going to allow Heinlein to agitate, to cause problems, but the issue is he doesn't want to. Hitler is encouraging him to agitate the federal government of Czechoslovakia. He's encouraged him to demand some independence, at least autonomy for the Sudetenland Germans. But Hitler doesn't necessarily have a full-blown plan as to how he's going to get the Sudeten Germans back, into German territory and have them be a part of Germany. He tells Heinlein that he would solve the Sudeten issue in the not-too-distant future. He doesn't want to rock the boat just yet. Luckily for him, there's going to be a crisis that's going to encourage him to rock the boat in May of 1938. There are rumors that start to make the rounds that Hitler is putting troops along the border with Czechoslovakia near the Sudetenland. And this rumor starts to spread. And that Britain and France hear about it. The Czech government, as a result of these rumors, starts to partially mobilize their troops, so to get them ready to fight a war. And Britain and France are going to send a warning to Adolf Hitler and say, hey, buddy, this is a multi-ethnic, multi-racial, multi-ethnic liberal democracy that was created out of the Treaty of Versailles. France has an agreement with them to protect them. So does the Soviet Union. This is of great interest to us. We don't like the fact that you're threatening them, and there will be a response if you threaten them. And Hitler has to back off, quote unquote. He's not really doing anything and say, hey, this is all a big misunderstanding. I'm not trying to invade Czechoslovakia. Please forgive any of the rumors that are spreading. And pretty much it's all rumors. It's not real. Hitler is embarrassed by this because it makes him look like he just tucked his tail between his legs to Britain and France. And it makes him look weak on a world stage where he has started to look stronger and stronger. It makes Britain and France look like they've regained some authority. He can't stand that. So because of this rumor, it's going to actually lead him to actually pursue and be more aggressive in terms of getting the Sudetenland. So he found the action humiliating, looks as though he is responding to the British and French threats. And as of May 28, 1938, he requests his officials to put together this thing called Operation Green, which is essentially taking over the Sudetenland and then eventually liquidating or taking over, whether directly or indirectly, the rest of Czechoslovakia. So he says, it is my unalterable decision to smash Czechoslovakia by military action in the near future. Again, he originally had no plan as to how he was going to, and what the time frame as to when he was going to get the Sudeten Germans to join Germany and then eventually liquidate the rest of Czechoslovakia. Because of a rumor that embarrassed him, he then says, you know what? I'm actually going to do what the rumor says that I'm going to do. So the world knows that Hitler is getting more interested and aggressive in terms of Czechoslovakia being added into the German Empire, particularly the Sudetenland. So in the summer of 1938, tensions are going to rise. The Sudeten Germans, on the instructions of Adolf Hitler, will start to increase their violence against the Czech government. And on September 5th, 1938, Czech President Edvard Baines is going to agree to all the demands of the Sudeten Germans for self-government. Heinlein is going to be told by Adolf Hitler, don't agree to those terms. Reason why is because Hitler is still ticked off about the fact about that rumor and how he had to tuck his tail between his legs with regards to Britain and France. He's ready for aggressive action, and he doesn't want this handled through peaceful settlement. So he is going to whip up a frenzy, put out propaganda that basically say, hey, look at the Czechs in Czechoslovakia. They're abusing the Sudeten Germans. It is not fair. It is not right. We have to respond with aggressive behavior. So there is a proposal on the table for peace to let the Sudeten Germans be somewhat autonomous, and then maybe eventually on their own they're able to join Germany, but that's not good enough for a fascist. It has to be aggressive military action, and on top of that, Hitler was embarrassed by the rumor in the May 1938 crisis that unfolded. So his whole objective here is going to use aggressive means to take over the Sudetenland. So the original agreement between President Edvard Baines and the Sudeten Germans is thrown out the window. It looks like Hitler plans on invading the Sudetenland himself. So September 1938, we got an emerging problem. It looks like Hitler is going to, again, invade Czechoslovakia and take over the Sudetenland, and then maybe potentially take over the rest of Czechoslovakia. Neville Chamberlain, being and you remember him, he's the British appeaser, he's the prime minister at this time, is very much interested in getting a deal with Adolf Hitler and avoiding war. He detests war, I told you about that. He believes that through proper negotiations, you can get a deal done that can avoid war, even with fascists who rely on the military and the aggressive foreign policy to fulfill the aims of their nation state. So he's going to start meeting with Adolf Hitler. He's going to meet with Adolf Hitler on September 15th, 1938 at Berchtesgaden. There, him and Adolf Hitler are going to make an agreement that essentially says the Sudeten German areas of Czechoslovakia should be transferred to Germany. That's the agreement that they made with each other. You're going to have Neville Chamberlain fly and interact with the French. The French are going to agree to these terms, and basically he's going to shove these terms down the Czechoslovaks' throat, the government's throat. He's going to meet with Hitler in Godesberg on September 22nd and 23rd and go to Hitler and say, hey, dude, I've got an agreement from everybody. And then Hitler's like, actually, no, this deal is not enough. It is not good enough. Because again, he doesn't want this done through liberal means, through negotiations. He wants to see soldiers march into the Sudetenland as of, he says here, September 28th to occupy the territory. He has no interest in giving the British and the French a victory in terms of showing that liberal government and democratic means and diplomacy work. He wants aggressive action. And what he says is, it is not enough that us Germans get the Sudetenland. See how Poland's up here and Hungary's down here? There are ethnic Hungarians in the southern portion of Czechoslovakia. There is a portion of Poland that is a border dispute between them and the Czechoslovaks. So what Hitler says is, we deserve to get the Sudetenland, but I'm not going to make an agreement with you guys unless Poland gets the territory that it desires and Hungary gets the territory that it desires. Because part of his objective, right, he's being strategic here. He knows that he wants to eventually take over Poland and take over most of the rest of Czechoslovakia for all himself. But he really wants to see Czechoslovakia fall because of the fact that he wants the Lebensraum, he wants the resources because it is a resource-rich country to a certain extent, and it's also a bastion of liberal democratic thought, and having a multi-ethnic empire sucks, and he wants to see it destroyed. Okay, so he says, I will only make an agreement with you guys if Poland gets what it wants and Hungary gets what it wants and we get the Sudetenland. If we can't reach an agreement by September 28th, I'm going to occupy the Sudetenland with German troops. And obviously the Czechs were like, hey, we're not agreeing to these terms. This is vastly different. This is aggressive. This essentially leads to the breakup of our nation state. And France says, you know what, buddy, we will back you up in this situation. If the Germans move into the Sudetenland with soldiers, we will back you up. Okay, so what else is going to happen here? You will see another meeting unfold, and the reason why is because Hitler's buddies are telling him that they're not ready for a war with Britain and France, and if Britain and France are willing to defend Czechoslovakia, we may be screwed at this time in history, in September of 1938. So you will have this conference in Munich, so the Munich conference or the Munich agreement, will be reached on September 29th, 1938. So like I said, Britain and France are prepared to fight. Hitler's generals are telling him he's not ready for war. Hitler is going to say, you know what, let's give this one more shot. Let's have one more conference. And there Mussolini is going to act like, I want to say this, Neville Chamberlain is going to get a lot of the credit here because he is the appeaser. He believes that through negotiation, through diplomacy, you can get something done. So he plays a role in arranging this. But Mussolini is going to come to the table and look like the peace settler, the savior, because the Nazis behind the scenes are going to give him the agreement that he will propose in which all four of them will agree to. So this is the agreement. So it was not written by Mussolini. Mussolini just acts like the guy that's coming up with this. So German occupation of the Sudetenland starts October 1st. The International Commission would determine the new frontier for the Sudeten Germans by October 10th. So the new boundaries would be settled by then. Czechs were allowed to leave the territory. Germans were allowed to enter. Poland was to be given the northern region that they had interest in. Hungary was to be given the southern portion that they had interest in. And Germany was to guarantee the independence of the rest of Czechoslovakia. Now, once you get the Sudetenland, that's it. You're not moving any further. And I should say this as well, and I told you this multiple times already. Czechoslovakia is not participating in this conference. So their entire territory is being divided by the four powers, and they have no say in what's going on. Another big slap in the face, particularly to the Soviet Union, is the Soviet Union has an alliance with Czechoslovakia and is very interested in protecting the Slavs that are there. They are also not invited to this conference, and Stalin views himself as a world power at this point. So two slaps in the face at the same time. Okay, I'm going to skip this video. You can view it on your own time really quickly, but it's important. Hitler, Mussolini, Chamberlain, and Daladier, who's the Prime Minister of France, negotiating the terms of this. Okay, so I said this. Neither Czech President Benz nor Soviet leader Stalin are invited to the Munich conference. So the Czechs are told that if they resisted the agreement, they would not get help from Britain and France, even though France guaranteed Czechoslovakia's borders at Locarno. So that Locarno conference, where the western borders between France and Germany were agreed, the borders of Czechoslovakia were also agreed at that conference. So it's a slap in the face. Also, following this conference, Neville Chamberlain is going to make an individual agreement with Hitler that pretty much says, Hitler and I, if there's any issues throughout the rest of the time between Germany and any other nation states, Britain and Germany will be settling these matters of international interest through consultation, so through diplomacy. And he walks off the plane with the paper in his hand, and he essentially says, we have peace in our time. Hitler won't go any further between the agreements at the Munich conference and between the agreement I got with him directly. Kumbaya, my lord, we have peace. There will never be another world war. In March of 1939, he's going to liquidate, meaning get rid of the rest of Czechoslovakia. And I'll talk about that on the next few slides. Let's play this video really quickly. So this is after the Munich conference. There's Daladier. There's some Nazi flags.
Down the bright, straight road towards a new understanding in Europe. And so at Hitler's Munich headquarters, the agreement that has made the biggest headlines since the armistice. Let no man say that too high a price has been paid for the peace of the world until he has searched his own soul and found himself willing to risk war and the lives of those nearest and dearest to him. Let no man criticize the bargain that the statesmen of Britain and France have struck until he has attempted to add up the total price that might have had to be paid for any other settlement, a price in death and destruction. That price will not be paid. There will be peace. It's the greatest diplomatic triumph of modern time. The scene changes to London as Downing Street expresses the nation's gratitude also to the lady who shares the Prime Minister's hopes and fears when Mrs. Chamberlain comes out for a walk in the park. And the Prime Minister comes home, home to an empire filled with joy and relief, home to a welcome that he will never forget.
We will definitely create it.
Next, I want to say that the settlement of the Czechoslovakian problem, which has now been achieved, is, in my view, only the prelude to a larger settlement in which all Europe may find peace. This morning, I had another talk with the German Chancellor, Herr Hitler. And here is the paper which bears his name upon it as well as mine. Some of you perhaps have already heard what it contains, but I would just like to read it to you. We, the German Führer and Chancellor, and the British Prime Minister have had a further meeting today and are agreed in recognizing that the question of Anglo-German relations is of the first importance for the two countries and for Europe. We regard the agreement signed last night and the Anglo-German naval agreement as symbolic of the desire of our two peoples never to go to war with one another again. We are resolved that the method of consultation shall be the method adopted to deal with any other questions that may concern our two countries, and we are determined to continue our efforts to remove possible sources of difference and thus to contribute to assure the peace of Europe.
Okay, so it should be emphasized this, right? Hitler makes that agreement with Hitler. Sorry, did I just say Hitler makes that agreement with Hitler? Chamberlain makes that agreement with Hitler. Hitler has no desire to even uphold the Munich agreement that was made in terms of you stop at the Sudetenland and that's it. Don't go any further, and no desire to uphold the agreement with Britain. At this point, because this agreement is made and he's able to get the Sudetenland and he knows that essentially he probably will have free reign in taking over the rest of Czechoslovakia, he views it as his expansionary efforts will not be stopped. Because again, Czechoslovakia is something that's made as a result of the Treaty of Versailles. It is a bastion, meaning it is the birth of what a liberal democracy and a liberal democratic system hopes to create, a multi-ethnic democracy that has multiple people living in it and harmony. He's like, if they can't even protect that damn thing, they sure as hell aren't going to protect Poland or anything else they go after. Okay, so that's part of it. So once this Munich agreement is made, President Benz is going to resign. Czechoslovakia is going to lose 70% of its heavy industry, 1/3 of its population, and both natural defense, meaning the fortifications that are there through the mountain ranges that are in the Sudetenland, and man-made fortifications of the Sudetenland. Okay, so there was also this part of the agreement that Slovakia and Ruthenia were given self-government for internal affairs, but still ultimately were controlled from Prague. So let's bring up the map really quick. We're not going to focus on the dissolve. So there's Slovakia. So Slovakia has its own ethnic group in it. The Czechs are over here, and the Czechs had control over the federal government at the time. So again, Hitler saw the Munich Agreement as nothing more than a stepping stone to the liquidation of the Czech state. So he views it as, this is just this is me testing the waters. This is me putting my toes in the water and then eventually running in and jumping in and taking over the entire thing. That's his whole objective there. Okay, so by early 1939, he's going to further disruption within the Czechoslovakian state. And the big thing he's going to do is he's going to promote a Slovak fascist party under the control of Joseph Tiso to wreak havoc and cause disruption and perform violent protests and try to demand independence from the federal government in the Czech state. Because again, Slovakia was given self-government for internal affairs, but they still were answerable to the Czech government that was in control of the federal government over Czechoslovakia. So Hitler's goal here is to basically foment a revolution by the Slovakian people. The president at the time, so Emil Hacha, is going to respond in the early 1930s to these violent protests by the Slovakian fascists by essentially declaring martial law and sending troops into the region. This gives Hitler the excuse to walk into Czechoslovakia and potentially take it over. So Hitler is going to have a meeting with Hacha and basically tell Hacha this. What you are going to do is you are going to allow the Slovaks to have their own independence and essentially give me Bohemia and Moravia. That's what you are going to do. Okay, so Hacha meets with Hitler to save Czechoslovakia. Hacha is forced to sign over Bohemia and Moravia to Hitler. This is because he's already sent in troops, essentially, into Czechoslovakia at that point. So he's starting to mobilize his forces and essentially threaten to send in troops and basically say, you either are going to hand over this territory or there's going to be a violent assault on your government and on your people. And the Slovaks are going to have some form of independence. So on March 15th, 1939, German troops occupy the rest of Czechoslovakia. March 16th, Bohemia and Moravia are declared a protectorate of Germany. Slovakia is going to get its independence because it is still a Slavic group of people. But they get their independence. They're no longer under the thumb of the Czechs, but they still will have to align their foreign policy to what the Nazis want to do. So they get more independence under the Nazis, technically, okay? So Slovakia is an independent state under the protection of Germany. Ruthenia is occupied by Hungarian troops, so the southern part. Let's quickly watch this.
And in Europe, the latest alarm proves to be a sequel to last year's crisis. Slovakians under the Munich settlement remain subjects of Czechoslovakia with their own semi-independent parliament. Of this, Dr. Tiso, the priest, was premier, and at its first meeting in Bratislava, or Pressburg, great was the jubilation among Slovakian nationalists and among the local German Nazi organizations. Then Dr. Hacha, president of Czechoslovakia, dismissed Dr. Tiso, who appealed to Hitler. Dr. Hacha himself went to Berlin, where he was obliged to accept the terms of Germany. Slovakia becomes independent, Czechoslovakia disappears, German troops occupy Prague. Bitter is the cup of humiliation which the Czechs must suffer. But in this turn of events, world peace is not threatened. Thus relieved, humanity may turn to those signs of constructive effort for peace which are accumulating around us.
So by March 1939, this whole entire thing is under German control, essentially. So this is taken over. Sudetenland is annexed. So it's taken over by Germany as a result of the Munich Conference in 1938. Poland gets this as a result of the Munich Conference. Hungary gets most of this in the Munich Conference, but gains some of it as well from the later on invasion and occupation by German troops. Slovaks perform some sort of rebellion. The Czechs send in troops to put it down. Hitler basically threatens the president of Czechoslovakia and basically says, either I send troops in and I violently overthrow you, or you give the Slovaks independence and I occupy the territory in which you directly control, which is your own area. So this becomes a German protectorate. Slovakia becomes essentially a quote-unquote independent state, but under German control. Peace in our time, Neville Chamberlain. He's not going to go into the rest of Czechoslovakia, Neville Chamberlain. And that's exactly what he does. By March 1939, it is in German hands. So this is where, like I said, Neville Chamberlain's going to change his mind and say, you know what, appeasing the dictators ain't worth it. Because they're just going to get more and more aggressive. They're going to gobble up what they want. The next area of interest for Hitler is going to be Poland. In particular, he wants this western corridor that was taken from Germany. So West Prussia was taken from Germany as a result of the Treaty of Versailles. And I should say this. So Austria, Prussia, and Russia in the mid-1700s, late 1700s, dismantled Poland and divided it amongst themselves. Woodrow Wilson, Kumbaya, self-determination, wants to create a new Polish state, and some of the territory is taken directly from Germany. So this western portion to create this new Poland is taken from Germany. So this western portion of Germany. You get this Polish corridor that, again, falls within Polish hands because it gives Poland, what is that? Access to the sea. This city of Danzig, which is a very valuable port city, which Hitler has really great interest in, is going to be proclaimed a free city by the League of Nations. So under the control of the League of Nations, both Poland and Germany can use its seaport. Hitler has the interest of taking this territory back and really getting the city of Danzig because it's a super valuable port city that he wants in particular. So, less than a week after the occupation of Prague, so when he sends troops in March 1939, Germany is going to propose that Danzig should be returned to Poland. Even though this is an international, under control of the League of Nations, they're going to reach out to Poland and basically say, hey, this was once a part of German territory, Danzig in particular. It should fall under our territory again. You should give us direct access through the Polish corridor to East Prussia via a German-controlled road and rail link. This is viewed as more reasonable than the demands for the Sudetenland because this whole territory was directly under German control. Sudetenland was not. It was technically under the Austro-Hungarian Empire back in the day. But here's the deal. Poland is not willing to give Germany this. They will say, we're not going to go down without a fight. Poland's minister, Colonel Beck, refused and saw this as an attack on Polish territory. That same month, Hitler's going to say Memel, which is part of Lithuania at this time. He's going to say, hey, Lithuania, this has a lot of ethnic Germans in it, and we want it, and you should give it to us. So it's a strip of land bordering East Prussia that has a substantial German population. Lithuania is in no position to fight back against Germany, so they hand the territory to Germany. So Germany reaches out to Poland for Danzig. Poland says, hell no, even though it's under the control of League of Nations. Memel, they ask for it from Lithuania. It goes into their hands, meaning German hands. Okay, March 30th, Britain is going to give a guarantee to Poland and basically say, hey, if Germany is going to challenge your territory, we are going to back you up. So this Anglo-Polish treaty that emerges makes Hitler so unbelievably angry. You see the quote on the screen here. He said, I'll cook them a stew that they'll choke on. And this was the agreement that the British made with Poland. So in the event of any action which clearly threatened Polish independence, in which Polish government accordingly considered it vital to resist with their national forces, His Majesty's government, meaning Britain, would feel themselves bound at once to lend the Polish government all support in their power. They have given the Polish government an assurance to this effect. I may add that the French government has authorized me to make it plain that they stand in the same position in this matter as do His Majesty's government. So it looks like Britain and France are going to defend Poland. And Hitler's like, what the heck, man? These guys wouldn't even protect the bastion of what liberalism is supposed to like represent, like that multi-ethnic democracy that they created in Czechoslovakia. They allowed me to gobble it up, and they're going to defend little old Poland that hasn't even existed for about over a century and a half, that just came back. So 2 days after this announcement is made by the British, Hitler's going to say that Anglo-German naval agreement, which happened right after the Stresa Front was formed, that basically said, hey, Britain and Germany were only allowed to have essentially equal naval ships, Britain a little bit more. That ends. The non-aggression pact that Hitler signed with Poland ends. He's going to order his chief of staff, Keitel, to prepare an attack on Poland, which is going to be known as Operation White. So the objective is this is going to be a limited war against Poland. It's not going to happen immediately, but it's going to be a limited war against Poland and hopefully not drag on into a world war against Britain and France. But you see the tensions are arising as of late March 1939. Another thing that happens, and you know this already, Albania. Mussolini sees what happens to Czechoslovakia. He sees what's happening with Poland and the threats that are being made towards Poland. And Mussolini is like, hey, I'm the founder of fascism. I have to show my strength. So he sends his troops into Albania and he takes it over in April 1939, that Good Friday takeover, right? And Britain and France, viewing this as coordination between Hitler and Mussolini, say, hey, you know what we're going to do? We're going to issue guarantees to protect Greece and Romania from any threats from Germany and Italy at this time. Germany and Italy, as a result of these actions by May of 1939, are going to sign that Pact of Steel. You really need to know this. You need to know this for the IB exam because this is part of the IB history guide, and this could be, the Pact of Steel itself could be a paper one topic for Germany, okay? And remember, this moves from the Rome-Berlin axis, which was more of a treaty of friendship and saying we're aligned in some areas, to now a treaty of basically mutual defense, that we will protect each other should one go to war with another country. So each power agreed to come to the aid to the other if it became involved in hostilities contrary to the wishes and desires. Hitler wants a war to start by the end of 1939. And we talked about this when we talked about Italy. Mussolini is not in the economic nor military position to defend him in a war, and he tells him not till 1943 or 1945 will I be able to defend you. So give me 3 to 4 years. And again, later on, when the war's about to break out, Mussolini basically sends Hitler this long list of demands that he needs in terms of economic supplies and military supplies to help him. And he basically gives Mussolini the go-ahead to basically stay out of the war until he's ready to a certain extent. But anyway, here's the deal. Okay, so the summer of 1939, you're going to get your Nazi-Soviet pact, which pact is spelled very funny here with the A capitalized. But anyway, the summer of 1939 is a crucial turning point. Stalin is up for grabs. The West is going to try to negotiate with him some terms of a deal because what they want to do is they want to create that war on two fronts and be able to go after the Germans by essentially, again, fighting them on a war on two fronts, so weaken their resources and what they are able to use. But the difference is that the Germans want to keep Russia on their side because they want to be able to knock out the West first and then eventually violate their agreement with the Soviet Union and take over the East, right? And they also want to make sure that if they go into Poland and take over the part of Poland that they really want, that western part, Soviet Union won't respond. So the Soviet Union in the summer of 1939 is very much interested, and again, it depends on the historian that you're talking to, right? But based off of our textbook, they are definitely interested in an agreement with the West. And they're trying to prove to the West that, yes, we may have different ideological standards, but we are willing to work with you because Germany is a threat. So in 34, Soviet Union joined the League of Nations. 35, you get the Franco-Soviet Defensive Pact, which is going to actually collapse after the Munich Conference because Soviet Union is not included in it, especially to protect its ally, Czechoslovakia. And Stalin is going to try, following Hitler's occupation of the rest of Czechoslovakia, to negotiate with France and Britain. But each side is very suspect of each other, and it's getting very difficult to have an agreement be made. So, on August 24th, 1939, you get your Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact. What does this say? The Soviet Union and Germany pledged to remain neutral in the event of either nation being attacked by a third party. So I want to say this. Stalin's looking out for himself, right? Stalin's looking out for his country and his stability of his country, and he thinks he could still get something out of Germany from this agreement, especially some manufactured goods or any natural resources that he may need while he's trading with them. So that's part of it. 2, he creates a larger boundary between him and the West by getting part of Poland. And 3, again, he's focused on the stability of his own country. So don't think this is like an agreement, the match made in heaven, two authoritarians loving each other and working with each other. This is more so of convenience. And for Hitler in particular, it allows him to get his slice of Poland that he wants right off the bat. He knows that the West is going to respond at this point, so he can attack the West first, knock them out with one swift punch, and then focus on the East, just like the old Schlieffen plan. So anyway, here's the deal. Soviet Union, Nazi Germany pledged to remain neutral in the event of either nation being attacked by the third party. The pact included a secret protocol dividing Northern and Eastern Europe into German and Soviet spheres of influence, which you can see on this map right here. This is how it was going to look based off of the agreement that they made. And you'll also see it written as this Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, because those were the foreign secretaries that negotiated. Just keep that in mind. Baltic states and Bessarabia and Romania were to be in the Russian sphere, and Poland was to be divided between the two powers. Once this happens, this is going to set off the alarm bells for the West, and they know that a war is coming now, because now Hitler doesn't have to worry about what the Soviet Union is going to do for at least a little while. So why is this great for both sides? For Hitler, the alliance meant that he could, again, I told you this, have a free hand in Poland and avoid fighting a war on two fronts. He also, in this agreement, they started to trade with each other. So he got some valuable raw materials from the Soviet Union, and this allows him to focus on the short-term goals of knocking out the West and then eventually focusing back on the East and getting his Lebensraum. He wants to attack the Soviet Union. That's his objective. This is a short-term goal. For Stalin, this is good. Japan on the east is a growing threat. We know they're not the big threat because the Soviet Union did get little skirmishes with them on the border of Manchuria, and they did succeed, but Japan could be a threat to them. They want to be able to focus on that. Germany and the West could potentially weaken each other in a war effort, allowing the Soviet Union to come out on top. There are territorial gains. He gets half of Poland and the opportunity to take Finland and the Baltic states, which is valuable, and the Soviet Union trading with Germany, right? So Germany gets technical goods, gives technical goods to the Soviet Union for food like wheat, right, and oil from the Soviet Union as well. And oil is the big thing that the Nazis need because they're synthetically producing it. Here's some political cartoons. I doubt this will be your paper one because this was the May paper one last year, but who knows? Someone is taking someone for a walk. 2 guns behind their backs. Somebody's going to betray each other at some point. And doubtful friends. They both have their foot in Poland, but they've got their fingers crossed, you could say, that Stalin has his fingers crossed, and they both have pistols on their sides. So they're ready to violate this. Okay. So how does the war outbreak? A day later. Well, I should say this. Again, Hitler did not believe, not in his right damn mind, would Britain and France defend Poland of all places when they couldn't even defend Czechoslovakia, which they really had agreements with. And it turns out, as of August 25th, Britain and Poland are going to sign a full military alliance with each other. Mussolini knows that a war is coming as a result. He says, hey, man, I am not ready for war. Hitler was already ready to invade as of August 26th. He's going to push his plans back to September 1st to try to convince the British to basically back off, not do anything, say, well, we'll protect the British Empire, we'll eventually reach an agreement on some form of disarmament, and basically just allow Germany to have a free hand in Danzig and the Polish corridor, and we'll leave it all alone. we'll leave the British Empire alone. We won't get involved in the war. Just give us the western portion of Poland, and we're good to go. No war. Britain is not interested in this. Poles are also not interested in this negotiation. Mussolini is panicking. Okay, Mussolini is like, I'm not ready for war, dude. I'm not ready for war. Please don't get me involved. So on August 31st, he tries to act as the savior, yet again, like he was in Munich, and try to negotiate an agreement between the countries. But Hitler has no interest at this point. He is ready for war. And there will be a false flag operation known as Operation Himmler at the Gleichwitz radio station. What will happen is that German officers are going to go into this radio station on the Polish-German border dressed as Polish troops. They're going to march in. They're going to pretend that there's a skirmish in there. They are going to broadcast an announcement in Polish, basically saying that the Polish have taken over this radio station, which was a key radio station for German propaganda. They will basically use prisoners from... I forget which labor camp right now off the top of my head, but they use prisoners from concentration camps that have already essentially died or close to death, kill them or they are dead, and put their bodies dressed in like German uniforms and Polish uniforms all over the place to basically signify that this was a Polish attack on the territory. Okay, so this was used as false flag operation, meaning it's ready to get you for war, to start a war. So at 4:45 on the next day, on September 1st, 1939, German troops invaded Poland and German planes started to bomb Warsaw. September 3rd, 1939. The British government is going to present an ultimatum to Germany to call off the attack by 11 a.m. No response is received at this point. Britain and France declare war. You have your World War II. You can watch the Operation Himmler video on your own time. All right, so Hitler's going to use this tactic known as blitzkrieg to defeat Poland. So this is lightning war. We're going to go over it more in detail when we talk about World War II. Poland is quickly defeated. Germany comes in from the west. Russia's going to come in from the east. They're going to divide essentially along the lines of that Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact, which again can also be referred to as the Ribbentrop-Molotov line, because those are the two guys that negotiated the deal. So October 1939, Hitler's going to offer more peace proposals to Britain, basically saying, I don't want to bomb you guys. I don't want to attack you guys. Let's see if we can end this conflict through peace. I'll allow you to maintain your empire. There are these attempts at peace, quote unquote, but obviously liberal governments are in no desire for peace at this point. He has shown how aggressive he is, and they know that he can't keep his promises. So there is a period between October 1939 to the beginning of 1940, which is known as the Phony War, because there's no real fighting that's going on. But fighting will pick up again in 1940. So April 1940, Hitler's troops occupy Denmark, land in Norwegian ports. May 10th, Germany attacked Holland, Belgium, and France simultaneously. The Dutch surrender in 4 days, Belgium by the end of May. British troops evacuate Dunkirk in June 1940, which is that movie, for some of you, well, you'll hopefully know this, that Harry Styles is in. So they evacuate from here and head back to the United Kingdom because there are British troops there to help out the French, the Belgians, and those people in the Netherlands. Okay, so Germans capture Paris as of June 14th. June 22nd, France surrenders. Germany occupies northern France and the Atlantic coast. Unoccupied France was allowed its own government under Marshal Pétain, but it's essentially a puppet state of the Nazis. Summer and autumn of 1940, to secure defeat of Britain in a planned invasion called Operation Sea Lion. I would know what that is. They needed control over the air of the British Channel, so it led to the Battle of Britain, in which the British Royal Air Force fought the Luftwaffe planes above the coast of Britain. So they're fighting each other along the coast. It seems like the Nazis are getting very close to essentially knocking out. They're attacking airfields along the coast and attacking naval bases and naval ships in the English Channel. With their goal is to get control of the English Channel, send troops in via the sea, and then also knock out the Air Force so that they're unable to respond. Hitler's going to make a crucial error. The British are going to end up bombing Berlin. And he's going to change his focus when he has the Royal Air Force on the ropes from attacking air forces and air bases to attacking cities like London to try to demoralize the people as much as possible. But what he did was he allowed, and it's retaliatory for what happened in Berlin, he allowed the British and the British to be able to rebuild and get their Air Force back in line. So this attack doesn't work, and what he's going to do is he's going to eventually leave Britain alone at some point and then switch to focusing on his Lebensraum in the east. So by the time you get to 1941 of June, Operation Barbarossa, which is the attack on the Soviet Union, is going to be launched. And Hitler thought this attack would be speedy, Soviets would be defeated, and then he could return to focus on Britain, but really he was going to get stuck in a much longer war, and the Russians were going to hand it to him. And then we were going to be able to join in and kick the Axis powers' butt. All right, so that's that for this lecture. Next lecture will be on the international response to German aggression, so we'll go a little bit more detail into that. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, and that's it.